The Kremlin bluntly rejected the new peace plan developed yesterday in Geneva by the Ukrainian, European, and American delegations. Putin's representatives stated directly that they can work with the 28-point plan, which they themselves sent to Washington through Steve Witkoff. Yuri Ushakov, assistant to the president of the Russian Federation, called many provisions of the United States peace plan for resolving the war acceptable for Russia. Meanwhile, the European plan and the new amendments to the American plan are unconstructive and, as Ushakov says, do not suit Moscow. At the same time, Vladimir Putin himself, in a conversation with Recep Tayyip Erdoğan, is already praising this first version of the peace plan and hints that he will not accept any new versions. But it's funny that while some in the Kremlin are shouting that they won't accept the new peace plan after Geneva, Kremlin spokesperson Peskov says Moscow hasn't seen the new peace plan yet. These are the unreasonable people we're asked to negotiate with. One says they haven't seen the new version yet, while the other says it's unacceptable to us. My name is Pechiy. Let's discuss this topic together, but before we start, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave any comment under this episode. Also, subscribe to my Telegram channel Pechiy News. The link is in the description of this video. There we post up-to-date news. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so with any donation or a paid sponsorship subscription using the links and details in the description of this video. It's already known the United States' plan to end the Russia-Ukraine war was significantly revised during Geneva negotiations. It was reduced from 28 to 19 points. Let me note right away that this plan was mainly written by Russians, but for convenience and to avoid confusion, we will call it the United States plan, or the Trump plan. So here's the thing. Changes to the plan were made after Kyiv and its European allies highlighted several unacceptable demands in the document. Thus, Ukraine reminded about its red lines regarding limiting the size of its army and territorial concessions, including giving up Donbass. Europe backed this and emphasized its sole authority over frozen Russian assets and the removal of Brussels-imposed sanctions. In Russia, people still live as if it's the day before yesterday. Russian President Vladimir Putin, in a conversation with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan, stated that he sees the first draft of the peace plan as a possible basis for a final peaceful settlement. The Kremlin communique states, quote, Vladimir Putin noted that the proposals in the version we have reviewed are in line with the discussions at the Russian-American meeting in Alaska and, in principle, can serve as the basis for a final peaceful settlement. The communique also states that Erdoğan, for his part, expressed his willingness to facilitate the negotiation process and is ready to offer Istanbul as a venue. Let me remind you that on November 21, when the media first published the entire list of the 2018 plan, Vladimir Putin stated that Trump's peace plan had been discussed in general terms even before the August summit in Alaska, and after that it was simply modernized. I should note right away that the Kremlin has already stated that the Russian side has not yet received any official information from the United States about the results of the negotiations on Ukraine in Geneva, and has not seen any plan from Europe. But just in case, the Kremlin already completely disagrees and rejects everything. Next, I'll quote the Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov. We haven't received any information yet. Of course, we are closely monitoring the media reports, which have been coming in abundantly over the past few days from Geneva, among other places. But officially, we haven't received anything yet. We haven't seen any plans so far. We've read the statements following the discussions that took place in Geneva. Some adjustments were made to the text we had seen earlier. Let's wait. The dialogue is ongoing and some contacts will continue. For now, I repeat once again, we haven't received anything. We haven't received anything officially. So we're confirming this, right? But this position doesn't stop Putin's aide from already rejecting all the amendments to the peace plan that were made yesterday in Geneva. The aide to the president of the Russian Federation, Yuri Ushakov, called many provisions of the United States peace plan for resolving the war acceptable for Russia, while the European plan is unconstructive and does not suit Moscow. Here is a quote from Ushakov. We were acquainted with one option that aligns with the understandings reached by the presidents of Russia and the United States during the summit in Alaska. And therefore, many I would say not all, but many provisions of this plan seem quite acceptable to us. As for the plans that are circulating, we already knew about the European plan this morning, and at first glance, it is completely unconstructive and does not suit us. But Mr. Marco Rubio announced that the Geneva negotiations with the Ukrainians fully satisfied the American side. But he also said there are 28 points, there are 26 points, a lot of things plus a lot of different speculations. We don't know whom to believe. That is, Ushakov has already stated that they will stick only to the plan written by Vitkov and Dmitriev in Miami. Ushakov says they're waiting for a signal from Washington on the negotiations, but also admits they haven't seen the European plan or what the Americans and Ukrainians agreed to in Geneva. But we definitely do not accept it. I would like to note that the Trump administration's proposal of 28 points to end the war in Ukraine has been criticized as extremely favorable to Russia. Meanwhile, the European counter-proposal is much more in line with Ukraine's wishes. Competent diplomats always seek middle ground between positions. But the Russians shout that they are, the victors over Nazism and all that, and that's why they expect everything to go exactly the way they want, just as they said. Unfortunately, Trump encourages this. Let me quickly outline the differences between the two plans on territorial concessions. The United States plan recognizes Luhansk, Donetsk, and occupied Crimea as de facto Russian, including by the United States. It also calls for freezing the front line in Kherson and Zaporizhzhia. The European project states about NATO expansion. The United States draft plan includes a provision that NATO will not expand further and provides that Ukraine will agree not to join NATO. The European project excludes these provisions, stating that Ukraine's accession to NATO depends on the consensus of NATO members, not on Russia's position. It is noted that there is currently no such consensus, but the wording leaves the possibility for it in the future. And the Europeans say, listen, why should we enshrine in legislation that Ukraine can't be accepted into NATO because of the position of some unwashed Russians? About the armed forces of Ukraine in the context of the United States plan. It is noted that the number of the armed forces of Ukraine will be limited to 600,000 people. The European plan assumes that the size of the Ukrainian army is limited to 800,000 people in peacetime. In both projects, there is no proposal to reduce the significantly larger Russian army. About the upcoming elections, the United States draft resolution also calls on Ukraine to hold elections within 100 days of reaching an agreement. Well, as you understand, that's too short a period for holding an election campaign, especially during wartime. The European draft only states that elections should be held as soon as possible after the agreement is signed, which seems very reasonable. But I suggest we talk more about this European peace plan in the next episode. For now, let's just note that the Russians are already shouting that they won't agree to anything except what they themselves propose. I'll leave it at that for now. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments under this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye.